So we're going to talk about three different ways that knowing the future or trying to make plans can be something that's negative. Having plans is always a good thing. I'm into planning. Financial planning and planning for the future is good. Having savings is good. A retirement is great. If you're going on vacation, you kind of need to know where you're going and have a plan. And so, but what this is talking more about, the best way of saying it is that you know what's going to happen. You are determining what the future holds. You think that your future is in your own hands. I'm going to do this and I'm going to go do that. You know, many of us probably didn't think we would be where we're at 5 years ago would be here today. We all have these plans, and a lot of them are artificial or self-made or mentally thought up or imagined. And what God is going to be trying to teach us is how that can be a negative thing. To guarantee the future, to promise the future, to say to yourself or to other people, oh, this is what's going to happen. I guarantee this, I promise this. I know this is what's going to happen. I know this is the man or woman for me. I know that I'm going to be this or that when I grow up. How many of us are really what we thought we would be when we were young? What you're doing now, is it what you thought you'd be doing? No. Did you marry the person that you thought you would marry? Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But many of our plans are kind of comical almost, because that's what we think. We have plans for our children, and we have plans for our future and our finances or what have you. And what God is going to tell us is our plans are very fickle and very fragile. You never know what might happen or what the day may bring forth. The first point is your plans can be changed by God. Your plans can be changed by God Himself. In Genesis chapter 11, there's the story. Have you ever heard of the story of the Tower of Babel? It's a very interesting, very amazing story that kind of explains, not in a lot of detail, but generically, the dispersion of the different races throughout the world. But let's go ahead and read Genesis chapter 11, verse 3. They began to say to each other, so there was a bunch of people there, and you got to think this is a long time ago. Humanity was still kind of fresh and new. Let's make bricks and harden them with fire. In this region, bricks were used instead of stone, and tar was used for mortar. Then they said, come, let us build a great city for ourselves with a tower that reaches into the sky, that reaches into heaven. This will make us famous and keep us from being scattered all over the world. But the Lord came down to look at the city and the tower the people were building. Look, He said, the people are united, as He spoke with the Trinity and those in eternity. The people are united and they all speak the same language. And after this, nothing they set out to do will be impossible for them. Come, let's go down and confuse the people with different languages. Then they won't be able to understand each other. In that way, the Lord scattered them all over the world, and they stopped building the city. So this group of people, they were going to build a tower. They were going to build a structure, and their goal was to build it as high up as they could, to reach even into the heavens. But their motivation was what? So we could be famous and keep us from being scattered all over the world. Now, how did that work for them? They became infamous, and they ended up being scattered throughout all over the world because God Himself directly intervened. Two reasons God may change your plans. One, as we saw here, is your motives. Your motives. Am I making plans to fulfill my desires or God's will for my life? That's a great question. Whatever you're building today, how you structure your life, the foundation of your life, is it built on God's plan for your life or your own plans? What is it that motivates you? What are your motives? And here, in this situation, in this story, it was fame and security. They didn't want to be scattered, and they wanted to be famous. Now, how many of us, especially our young people, desire fame and popularity? and they will structure their life and make plans accordingly. A lot of those plans are negative and harmful and not good. And some for security. They didn't want to be scattered. And how many of us make plans to be secure and to be safe? And we're going to do everything that we can. And as we learned, our wonderful Miss Wanda, if I'm not mistaken, she was robbed this week. She had a horrible incident that happened to her. And it was unexpected. It wasn't planned. And we never know, no matter how much we want to be secure and strive for safety and security, that can be altered instantaneously. That's why it's important for us that our motives are not to be for fame or pleasure or anything that's artificial, but our motive is to be in the middle of God's plan and in the middle of God's will for our life. Every day we wake up, we should say, God, what is your plan for me today? Because sometimes God may want to scatter us. As you think in Acts chapter 5 and 6 and 7, the Christians were all together and they didn't want to leave because they were afraid. And so they stayed there in their little holy huddle and they didn't move and they stayed located in Jerusalem. And you know what God had to do? Because God's plan was what? For them to do what? Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Well, they couldn't do that all sitting in Jerusalem. So you know what God allowed to happen? A persecution. And the church was persecuted. And what it says is that the church was scattered abroad. They all had to leave and go to different cities throughout the world. That was God's plan. Sometimes God's plan isn't to be safe or secure. That may be our plan. My plan is to be healthy. My plan is to be safe. My plan is to be secure. My plan is that no harm comes to me. And I will do whatever I can to make sure that I will obtain that. And sometimes God's plan is not for that to happen. Sometimes God's plan for our lives is persecution and difficulty and illness and sickness, as we see in the Scriptures. And we'll run from that plan. And God is just waiting for us to submit to His will. And fame and pleasure. We have to be careful in how we orchestrate our plans and the motives of our heart. Next is mistakes. Mistakes. Am I making plans using my own understanding or God's wisdom? This is very important. Whatever your plan may be, maybe you're making a big decision in your life, or maybe a small decision. How involved is God in that plan? If you're going to go on a trip, or you're going to go out of town, or you're going to go do something, you're going to move or relocate, have you involved God in those plans? You're going to change a church or do what have you. Whatever it is, whatever it may be, is God involved? Have you sought His wisdom or are you using your own limited intelligence? I can't go very far on my intelligence. I can't go very far on my own knowledge or my own experience because I'm extremely limited in that. So if I'm going to make a choice or a decision, it needs to be based on God's wisdom and the Word of God. Who you're going to marry. I used to be a youth pastor, and so many people would get into relationships purely based on their own limited intelligence and experience. A teenager doesn't have much of that. They may disagree, but here's the thing. You would sit there and think, you don't have any plans. You're not involving God in any way, shape, or form of this relationship. They would get involved in a relationship with a boy who wasn't a Christian. That is unwise, and God would say no than His Word. They would get involved in a relationship and be physically or sexually active, and that would be in disagreement to the Word and wisdom of God. In all sorts of ways, they would get involved in relationships, and you just would know and try to help, but you just know they wouldn't listen. Why? Because they believed what they knew was what was best. Who knows what's best, you or God? God 100% of the time. And so you must involve God in your relationships. You must involve God in your choices and decisions, or you will end up like the people of Babel. And your plans will be thwarted, and negative things will happen, and drama will come. And a lot of that could have been avoided. If they would have said, God, we're thinking about building this tower. What are your thoughts about it? Or Adam and Eve, you know what? We're thinking about eating this apple that the serpent offered to us. What do you think we should do, Lord? What do you think his advice and counsel would have been? But so often we make the mistakes, and then we cry out to God to do what? Help, fix them. And you know what? You know what grace is? You know what mercy is, God's grace and mercy is him fixing the mistakes that you made that you could have avoided by just asking him to be involved in the first place. And he doesn't say, I told you so. He comes with his grace and his mercy, and he will come to your side and he will help you. And if you have time, anytime during this sermon, write out Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 right there. I won't mind if you look distracted. So, number 2, your plans can be changed by the unexpected. By the unexpected. There's another story of a man who was making plans for his own life and thought he had it all together and thought he knew what was coming next. Luke chapter 12, verse 16. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, what should I do? I don't have room for all my crops. Then he said, I know, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have enough room to store all my wheat and all my goods. And I'll sit back and I'll say to myself, my friend, he must not have had many friends, so he's just going to talk to himself. My friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, what? You fool. You will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for? Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God. Amen. 2 reasons the unexpected may change your plans. 1, delayed giving. Delayed giving. What I see here with this man is that this is a man that maybe was surprised by his inability to do something with all of his wealth and his savings. He maybe planned on using that. His plan was, I'm going to use this and enjoy it, and I'm going to use this and I'm going to use it on myself. I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry. I'm going to enjoy my life to the fullest with all my savings and all my wealth. But what was unexpected was his death. And if he knew what the future held, what do you think he would have done with all of that wealth and all of that substance and all? He probably, I would think, he would have given it away. If you had millions of dollars and a week left to live, are you just going to go out and party? I would hope that, I'm going to try to help as many people as I can with this money that I have. But this man didn't know that. You know what? Instead, his plan was, I'm going to enjoy my wealth for my own pleasure instead of giving it to give other people pleasure and help and love and compassion. No one is promised another day. Give as if it was your last. So often we hold on to our wealth and our savings or our money or maybe we get a surprise financial blessing and we think, oh, just think of all the things I can do with this to enjoy my life. And what I think in the back of my head sometimes is God says, you fool. You think this money that I have given you is meant for your own blessing, when actually I want you to bless others with this. How many of us are so concerned, like enough is never enough? Maybe some of us spend a lot, and we spend. Some of us save. But the bottom line is, all of that is for us. How many of us give? And that's what I want my heart to be. And that's what I want your heart to be as a church, is that we give. We just can't give enough. We give as if we are on a timeline, that we only have a short time on this earth, which the Bible says we do. And the Bible says, what's going to happen to all the money that you saved and all the money that you spent and all the things that you bought? It's going to go to someone else and dispersed and divided up, and it'll be as if you never had it in the first place. But the money that you give and the things that you do for others, that continues on. Maybe even into eternity. depending on how you place it and where you invest it. Next is delayed ministry. No one is promised another day. Serve as if it was your last. I love this verse 21. God says, yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God. How many of us said, oh, well, when this happens, then I'll be wholeheartedly committed to the Lord, to church, to serving others? Whenever I finish school, or whenever I finish this training, or whenever I finish this class, or whenever I retire, or whenever I get a reliable car, or whenever I get enough money, then I'll serve the Lord and have this rich relationship with God. There's always one more plan that we need to accomplish sometimes. And when my kids grow up, then I'll serve the Lord, because it's just too busy. When I'm out of school, then I'll serve the Lord. When I've accomplished or completed this task or this plan for my life, then I will commit my ways to Him. Does that time ever come? No. You may say, when I retire, well, then you retire and then you have illness and you have other shortcomings. When I feel better, then I'll serve the Lord. And sure, there are things that hinder us from serving Him in a capacity that maybe others do. But we're talking about delayed ministry. Have you been a person that has said, you know what? I'll serve the Lord after this. I'll serve the Lord when this happens, or when this area of my life is finished. But there's always something else that happens. If you don't have kids, you're going to be sick. If you're not sick, you're going to get a job promotion that involves more responsibility. If you don't get that, you're going to have other issues, and your car is going to break. There's always going to be something that happens that's going to keep you from serving the Lord and having a rich relationship with God. Do you have a close walk with the Lord? Do you serve the Lord directly and in His ministry and His church? Are you just an attender? Do you barely find time to even go to church, much less serve in the church? Why is that? Probably because you have plans. That's what it is. You have plans. I love church. And it's not just because I'm a pastor. I've always been that way. Ever since I became a Christian. And I love coming together with other Christians. I love worshiping the Lord, whether it's up here or down there. I just enjoy it. And you know what happens when you love something? You make it a priority. I can't see myself not being here or worshiping the Lord in some capacity, in some way. I don't know why that is. I don't think I'm special. I've just always felt that way. And it always blew my hair back when other people didn't feel that way, other Christians, that church or ministry or serving was just like something that was optional for them. And I couldn't get over that. I never understood that. And so I think it's because people have plans. You follow your plans. If your plan is your family, then that's where your path will take you. My kids are in school and they have certain pathways that they have to go, whether they're going to be in arts or be in economics or whatever. And then they make a plan and all the classes kind of follow in line, and that's the direction they go in high school and in college, and that's where they go. As a Christian, I believe our plan should be to serve the Lord. So everything else kind of falls in that pathway, and we have to say yes or no. Well, I want to be in economics, but I really love art. Well, you got to pick one or the other because you can't do both. Very few people can have two majors in college. Got a major in one and minor in the other. Because one's going to consume the most of your time. And if your plan is the Lord and serving Him, then everything else kind of has to fall to the wayside and everything else has to adjust. Whether it be whatever plans it is. Some people, it only takes a sniffle for them to find a reason not to go to church. Or they're tired and they don't go to church and serve the Lord. Or they feel inadequate so they don't serve or want to teach. Or whatever their reasoning is. You have to set those aside. It takes sacrifice, and you have to plan to serve the Lord. It has to be part of your plan. If not, God will always get your leftovers, and you'll always be poor in your relationship with God. And so next, on the back of your sheet there, Write out Proverbs 27:1. Look that up and write that out. I want to challenge you to do that during this sermon. Verse 3, your plan should be flexible to the will of God. And I love this. There's probably people in here that are promise breakers. Now, you don't intend to break your promises, right? You let people down. Your kids are always like, but you said you would do this. You kind of always have to adjust your plans, or you're always later than you want to be, or you can't show up to things that you said you would go to, or things just happen in your life, and your life is a little unpredictable. God's going to give you a plan so you don't let other people down, that you don't break your promises, which I have done a lot. In our family, once you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it, no matter what. And no matter how little or how big it is. And believe me, it is very frustrating sometimes, especially with me, because I'm kind of flippant with what I say I'm going to do. I don't know if some of you are. I'll be, hey, will you take out the trash today? Sure. No problem. I'll be sitting in bed. It'll be 11:50 at night. Somebody will wake up and say, Jay, did you take out the trash today? No, I'll just do it tomorrow. That doesn't go over at our house. Because you say you're going to do something, so what do? You get up, you get out of bed, you go downstairs, you take out the trash at midnight, because that's what you said you were going to do. But instead, I should have said, I will take out the trash today if the Lord wills. That's going to help you. Lord willing, I will take out the trash today. I'm going to give you a secret to really help you in your life. So listen up, y'all. Your plan should be flexible to the will of God. Listen to the Apostle Paul. He really took this to heart, this will of God, and really trusting in God's plan for him. Acts 18, verse 21. We have a first few verses we're going to read. But Paul bade them farewell, or told them farewell, saying, I must by all means keep this feast that comes in Jerusalem, but I will return again to you. Very dogmatic, very powerful, passionate statement, a big promise. And he says this, if God will. And he sailed from Ephesus. Romans 1:10, Paul says, I'm making requests, if by any means now at length I may have a prosperous journey by the will of God to come to you. Romans 15:13, that I may come unto you with joy by the will of God, and may be with you refreshed. 1 Corinthians 4:19, but I will come to you shortly if the Lord will. 1 Corinthians 16:17, for I will not see you now by the way, but I trust to tarry a while with you if the Lord permit. In Hebrews 6:3, I love this. And this is a good verse to really put into your spiritual wallet or purse. And this will we do if God permit. So whenever you are making promises or saying you're going to do something, or you want to make a plan, God says whenever you make a plan, and it's your plan, you really should involve God in that plan, or be flexible with God may have for you in your future. Maybe your plan, whatever your plan may be, physical, marital, and relational. This is going to be a good phrase for you to really apply to your life that'll really help you in, one, not letting people down, over-promising and under-delivering, but also it shows trust in God. Two reasons your plan should be flexible to God's will. One, it lets God know you are surrendered to Him. What do you think the Lord thinks when He's looking down and He sees you and somebody says, hey, what do you plan on doing with your life when you graduate college? Well, I'd like to be a dentist if God wills that for my life. What do you think the Lord thinks? He's thinking, there's a man or a woman down there that's allowing me to have control of his life. They want to be a dentist, but I may make them a missionary, and they've already determined in their heart that they are flexible with that. Versus, what are you going to do when you grow up? I'm going to be a dentist. And then God tries to alter that plan, and for years you're going to boo-hoo and cry about how you didn't accomplish your plan, and God kind of interrupted and inconvenienced you by doing something else. Are you going to marry this girl? Yeah, we're getting married. She's the one. I know she's the one, or he's the one. Well, instead you should say, you know what? We're close and I love her or I love him. And if God wills, we'll have a future together. You know what that does? That lets the Lord know that you're flexible if he decides to change or alter that plan that you have. But if you say, yep, she's the one. He's my soulmate. We're going to be together. I've already got our kids named, and we've already got them. You know, one's going to be Sophia, and the other one's going to be Brooke, and the other one's going to be Axel. And, you know, I've got them all named. They're all named. And you've got 10 years down the road playing with this person that you've been dating for 3 months. And, you know, and that's, you know what that is? That's, the Bible says, you know what that is? It says it's evil. Such boasting is evil. Because you know what God says when you plan your future out? God says that you're boasting. What are you boasting about? Knowing the future. Why is that boasting? Because you're saying that you can do something you can't do. If I say, hey man, I go to the basketball, hey, I can dunk this basketball, and I'm bragging about how good of a basketball player and I can dunk. And everybody there knows that I can't dunk the basketball. But if I just talk about everybody about how I could do that, you know what that is? That's boasting. It's bragging about something I can't do. And so when you plan your future and you do not have a caveat there to say, but if God permits, that's what will happen. But if God changes my plan tomorrow, I'm okay with that. 2, it lets others know God is in charge of your life, which is amazing. It'll let your children, your friends, strangers, your spouses know, you know what? That my husband or father or mother or friend, they are sensitive and they're surrendered to God, to whatever they would have for their life. Whatever that may be. Your friend says, hey, can you come to my house this weekend? We're going to, I want to get together with you. Absolutely, I will be there if God wills. That lets that other person know, hey, okay, they're going to be there, but you know what? They're surrendered, and they're sensitive, and they're flexible to the will of God. But instead you say, yep, I'll be there, and then you don't show up. What does that tell your friend? You're unreliable. So do you want to be unreliable, unpredictable, or have a testimony of someone who has surrendered their life and their plan to God? You know, say, hey, you call them up, I wish I could come, but God had other plans for me. You know, I got sick or I got whatever. And it's just a lifestyle of trusting the Lord and letting and this is one way of doing it. Let's read back in the verse on the front of the page in James. It says, if the Lord wants us to, we will do, verse 14. How do you know what your life will be like tomorrow? Your life is like the morning fog. It is here a little while, then it's gone. What you ought to say is, if the Lord wants us to, we will live and do this or that. I like that. I think that's encouraging because you know what? Our lives are unpredictable. Tomorrow, your health could take a turn for the worse. Tomorrow, you could break your leg. Tomorrow, you could die in a car accident. Tomorrow, anything could happen. A million different things could happen. And for you to say, I'm going to do this, says that you have the power of God to know your future, and you don't know what the day may bring forth. You don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now, much less 5 years from now. Now, is it good to save? Absolutely. Is it biblical to do that? Absolutely. Is it good to plan for the future and plan for your retirement and all those kind of things? Absolutely. But don't bank on that. Is it good to invest in your stocks and have a wide portfolio? Is it good to do your 401k? Absolutely. But you can't. That is not a guarantee for your life. All of that could be swept away. It could take up wings and fly into the sky. But when you trust the Lord will never leave you nor forsake you. No matter what happens to your wealth or relationships, God will always be there. And so what the overall message today is, trust God with your future. Go to God with whatever plans that you are considering and have Him actively involved. And you will be blessed, and God will be there, and He will help you along the way.